Time of intersection, 55 minutes.
Roger, Command. We'll have the defense towers online.
We're coming up to Twin Falls, descending to 300 feet.
Shit! What the hell was that?
It's stalkers! They know we're human!
So quit yapping and land already!
You wanna fly this thing? Be my guest!
Resistance 2 is the sequel to Resistance Fall of Man, developed by Insomniac Games and released exclusively for the PlayStation 3 in 2008. That's right, it's an exclusive, so you know it's gotta be good, right? Well, yeah, okay, that's one way of thinking. Resistance 2 is an interesting sequel in terms of its overall design and mechanics, and that every time it takes a step forward, it also takes a step back. What you end up with is a game that isn't really better or worse on the whole than its predecessor. You just get, well, you just get a pretty standard, boring shooting game. Following on from the end of the first game, you resume the role of Nathan Hale, picked up in the game's prologue by a group called the SRPA, or the Special Research Projects Administration, dedicated to fighting and eradicating the Chimeran threat.
One of the other towers has reactivated it! Shut it down! It is no longer possible! Which tower activated it?
Hale is inducted into their ranks and joins a special forces group called the Sentinels, who are soldiers infected with the Chimeran virus kept under control by something called inhibitors. Because having a bunch of special forces soldiers who could turn on you at any minute, literally walking around your home base, is such a good idea, isn't it? Anyway, Hale works with a scientist who looks like Larry David, and he's supposed to regularly take this medication to prevent him from being fully infected by the virus. This is something he chooses to ignore at multiple points in the storyline because I guess they thought it was really cool to have a protagonist who has complete disregard for his own safety and that of his teammates. Great life lesson there.
Offer accepted.
In the game's prologue, we see a creature called Daedalus that is psychically feeding orders to the Chimera troops, and this thing serves as the main antagonist for the game, even though we don't see it all that often. But the plot is little more than a vessel to get you from level to level, where you'll be killing the legions and legions of Chimera troops over and over throughout the game's 10 or so hour-long campaign. Hale is just your standard shaved head military grunt with nothing interesting to say, and with a jaw so square you could probably set your watch to it. This time around the setting is the United States, initially San Francisco, but you will be seeing a lot of other areas like Idaho, California and Utah. There's 7 chapters in total which take anywhere from about 30 to 60 minutes to complete each, and they often end in large-scale boss fights. There is a great amount of variety visually in between each chapter, and the graphics are again pretty top-notch for the PS3 with an almost constantly stable frame rate. The weapon and character models have been improved since the first game, and just the sound and music in general is fantastic. Unfortunately, there's more to a game than just its presentation, and Resistance 2 kinda falls flat on its ass in almost every single other aspect. Like Resistance Fall of Man, this is a tough game. The normal difficulty setting is really what you can expect from a hard mode in any other game, and a lot of the gameplay falls down to trial and error, or try and die as I like to call it. One of the new enemy types is the Chameleon, which is a cloaked enemy that only becomes visible when it's about 3 feet away from you, at which point you've literally got a second or so to react before it kills you in a single hit, regardless of the difficulty setting. These things are frequent in the campaign, and no matter how good your reflexes are, you're going to die to them a fair bit, and it seems like it's just something put in as a trap for first-time players. Sounds irritating? Well, this is just the first of many in a long list of bizarre design choices that just pull the game down to mediocrity. For instance, now they've adopted a regenerating health system in lieu of a fixed health bar. This is explained in the storyline because Hale now has regenerating abilities or something like that, but this seems like a crux for lazy design more than a coherent plot choice. Also, now you're only able to hold 2 weapons at once instead of walking around with a weapon wheel and a full arsenal. Why go to all the trouble of designing all those great weapons if you're not going to let us use them? I wasn't that fond of Resistance 1, but I did like how it had a fixed health bar and let you carry a dozen weapons at any time. At a point in the gaming industry where every single shooting game was starting to copy those COD mechanics, to have a game come along that basically flipped the bird at that construct was beautiful. But now they've just thrown all that away. Oh, and did I mention they also took away the vehicle sections? Yeah, what the hell? On a plus side, I should mention that enemies are a lot less bullet spongy, at least the basic Chimera grunts are anyway. Your standard foot soldier being able to eat a whole magazine from a carbine rifle was something that always irritated me in the first game, but now in Resistance 2, they can take a lot less damage, which makes it feel a bit more balanced. There's also a lot more checkpoints throughout each chapter, which again is a good thing. but they haven't really fixed anything else that was wrong with the first game, and the gunfights are still just you against a couple dozen Chimera troops, and again, it's just infuriatingly cheap. Horde enemy types are always a nuisance, and Resistance 2 manages to keep that tradition going strong by throwing all these emaciated zombie type enemies at you that almost humorously run right past your compatriots as if they don't even exist. You will suffer death after death after death. I just found myself really loathing this game at times because I would enter a large area and notice all the strategically placed crates and just know that the moment I set foot in it, a bunch of bad guys would just come out of every nearby broom closet and start firing on me, totally ignoring the dozen allies fighting alongside me. Now, I like to think I'm pretty good at shooting games, Lord knows I play enough of them, but I would say I probably died anywhere from 100 to 150 times throughout the campaign, and this is on the so-called normal difficulty setting. Death really isn't that much of an issue, but in this game it is, because the vast majority of combat areas are just horribly designed with utterly no sense of fairness or balancing for the player. You get those rare moments when you make it through a really intense fight without having to replay it 4 or 5 times, and it's such a great feeling. It's like, wow, the game can actually work. But to me, most of the time, it feels like a kid with bipolar. You know, he's naughty one minute and nice the next. Somewhere deep down you love him, but you know you'd rather just give the little shithead up for adoption than put up with all this hassle. Now, this is a shooting game made by people who make platforming games, and that's exactly what it feels like. It's an average shooting game at best, and anyone who thinks it's good, I've just got to ask you, what do you think is bad? I do remember this game had a large multiplayer community, and yeah, fair enough, online components of games are often much better than the single player, shaped largely by the communities themselves. So if you're one of those folks who spend hours on end in the multiplayer, I respect that, and I'm not going to insult you by talking that mode down, considering how much fun you guys all surely had. But the single player is just an utter mess, and it really took all of my willpower to just make it through for a single playthrough. Resistance 2 got such high praise when it came out, and I don't know whether it was a classic case of paid reviews, or whether it might have been a case of people with PS3s not wanting to admit their prized exclusive was a total letdown. If you can find a second person to play through the co-op mode with, then I guess it could be a little bit more entertaining. You know, maybe make a drinking game out of it and take a shot of something every time you're subjected to a cheap or irritating death. You'll be pissed in 15 minutes. But it's just kind of a bummer. I mean, they had a really good foundation and a real chance to improve all of the issues with the first game, but they didn't, and they just added a whole new bunch of problems on top. If you've got a PS3, then it's probably worth checking out as one of the few exclusives for the console, but as a shooting game, primarily, this is nothing worth writing home about. In the next video, I'll take a look at the final game in the series, Resistance 3, and we'll see if the third time's the charm.
So, are you gonna make your last hours count? Because if not, I'd like to know in advance.